what we're trying to do here with this Zoom is that we've got a lot of questions about what this tech hub is, what it means, and how all of us can engage appropriately. And I'll start by saying that it feels to me, even though we've been a close partner with the Montana Department of Commerce and the university system, that we're kind of building a plane while we're flying it. Right? There's not a real great cookbook to this thing. This is a bit new for all of us.
Correct.
So
Yeah, I'd agree, Todd. Yeah, I would say that same thing. I would say that we are now in the phase of a Silicon Valley back in the early 60s, 70s, right? And I think that's a good analogy. I mean, I think the Silicon Hub started because a group of companies got together. There was a critical mass, technology moved, and there was a real demand. And we have exactly the same thing here. We have 41 photonics companies that have been around since the 70s. Not all 41, but it's been an ever-growing cluster across the state. We also have a number of natural resource disaster recovery sensing companies. We have unmanned system companies. So again, photonics and smart sensors all are those industries. And we have reached a critical mass where really what the hub means is that the U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA, looked around and said, gee, Montana, you've really got something going on in that photonics area. Let's designate you as the hub for that activity and focus our energies on the development of those technologies, photonics, smart sensors for that area.
So, Mary, can you describe why this designation and why this federal set of dollars that are coming to Montana is different than what we've seen in the past? Because we pick up the newspaper, see online all the time that, you know, MSU, University of Montana, gets another big federal grant for research and development. Yep. Can you explain why this is different?
Yeah, so there's one big reason that it's different, and that is that this is industry led. So unlike a lot of the other federal R&D technological development type programs, which predominantly go to universities, this one is specifically about commercializing technologies, advancing a technology so that we can rapidly commercialize it, that regains the United States predominance globally in that technology. And that's a huge difference. It is also the exact reason, Todd, that you were mentioning that the way that the phase 1 application that got us the designation was built as a partnership between the university system, but most importantly with industry and the chamber, and then government sort of working in as, you know, on both sides.
So, and we'll come back to, you know, there's a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We'll come back to that in a second. But can you talk about like this industry-led component? Can you describe how you envision or how you believe the federal government is intended for this to be like an industry-led sort of effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So within our phase 1 proposal, we actually provided a diagram, and that diagram showed that technology, photonics, smart sensing, autonomous systems, but that technology fed out into application areas, those applications being precision ag, critical resource management, national defense, manufacturing, et cetera. And so in that diagram, we specifically said, we get that this is not about R&D for the sake of R&D. These are the precise industry areas that we have already bringing to you partners that are ready to work with this. On the phase 1, we ended up having 87 different organizations that signed on to various letters, had various roles across that, and that was largely made up of a lot of businesses.
So let me give an example and you tell me if I'm on the right track.
Sure.
So John Deere, big role in precision agriculture. They see that as they look ahead, precision agriculture is going to be where the future is.
Yep.
So they sit at the table with the university system and say, here's the challenge that we have yet to overcome with sensors for delivering micro applications of fertilizer or weed spray. Can you help us go from where we are today to where we want to be next year?
Perfect.
And
Yep,
necessarily in
that's
30
exactly.
years.
Yep, exactly. Where do we want to be next year? Where do we want to be in 3 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years, 30 years? Yep.
And so I use
And that's the key thing, is that the problems that you said it, Todd, the problem comes from industry to solve. This isn't something that the university system in a lab goes, oh, I wonder what about this, or I wonder about that. These are problems that are presented for needing solution by industry.
And so like one of the examples that I use when I talk about this is, imagine a spray rig being pulled behind a John Deere tractor, traveling at 15, 20 miles an hour. There's sensors on the spray rig, and they are able to identify the difference between a plant and a weed.
Yep.
And deliver the precise amount of fertilizer or spray to the plant that needs it, instead of spraying the whole field.
Exactly. And ironically, we're already there. So now it's the question of, now that we're there, how do we add AI so that as it's going along and runs into different scenarios, it can change that up. The temperatures change, the wind speed has changed. It can change up, that sprayer can change up what it's doing. And then you add in quantum and make it go bazillion times faster in those calculations and those decisions. It's just a really exciting time. And it's a really great time to be a hub for photonics and sensors.
So now you mentioned phase one at the beginning. Let's go back. There are 3 phases. Phase one, you obviously got to get past phase one in order to have a phase 2. Can you describe each one of the phases and deadlines and dollars that may be associated with those?
Yeah, so phase 1, we had to have an application back into the EDA, Economic Development Administration, back in August. And in phase 1, we laid out exactly what we thought our technology was, our expertise that would make us the best place for a hub. We also had to lay out some projects that we thought needed to be part of becoming the best hub. And these are not technology projects alone. So one area was building test beds around those technologies we've been discussing, but it's also about the workforce that has to be grown to make sure that we can produce those technologies at a commercialized rate that's successful. It is also about bringing in other businesses, expanding the business, and then bringing in venture capital and investment so we can grow the effort from, it's really sort of seed capital that the phase 2 would give us. So when we put in that application, we actually asked for a designation, which we got, to be the Photonics Hub. They also gave us a strategy grant of $500,000 to build out the next phase, which is the phase 2 application. The phase 2 application is where we get more in the dirt with what our actual projects are going to be, who's going to be leading them, how are they going to be developed, how can we prove that we have the resources to carry this out. It's also about making sure that, because we're a rural hub, that we are serving underserved communities across our state, underserved businesses, engaging areas that historically Montana's been sort of a flyover state, has not been really been able to attract the kind of dollars that big urban areas have. So there's a little bit of a sales job on our part to show, yeah, you gave us the hub, but we're ready to get the money now. And so phase 2 brings in the 50 to 100 million over those project areas. We're thinking maybe 4 to 6 projects at the most. And again, those aren't tech projects. One project would be like the technology development. Another project would be like workforce development. A third project would be venture capital development.
Okay.
And we're still working those out. We're a week away from being 2 weeks since we got designated. Right now, we're just working on the governance structure of bringing all the right folks to the table, getting all that right input so that everybody can be part of that phase 2 application process before it's submitted. They can see it, know kind of where they fit, know how the pieces come together. And so we've got our work cut out for us. Again, that phase 2 application has to be in. We're leaping ahead to on February 29th of 2024 to get through this next phase and get our 50 to 100 million to start us out.
When do you expect that to be announced if we are one of the first to get the 50 to 100 million?
Yeah, last time it went from August to October to make the announcement. I would expect a similar timeline, maybe even quicker. The money's appropriated, it's ready to go. But it's just really the decision making on who gets to play in this round. So there were 31 hubs that were designated, but they're probably only going to give funding in this round, this coming year, to 10 to 12 of them. And that's how we get the magic 50 to 75 million numbers, because that's dividing it up between 10 to 12 type different hubs. And so we have to position ourselves in competition with the other 30 hubs. We're not really in competition with a lot of them for two reasons. Number one, there's not other photonics ones. There is another photonics one that got a strategy grant, but they did not get a hub designation in North Carolina. So we're kind of we're the only one that really is a photonics hub. And secondly, we again are one of the ones that were very strong as a rural hub. There's 7 that were designated as rural hubs, and we are by far the largest consortium. We pulled together the most folks. We have real proven technology. So, but again, you still got to put together the right kind of sales job that they go, yep, we knew you were a hub, and now we know exactly that you can use this money quickly and rapidly deploy it to get these technologies evolving.
So this is kind of a two-part question. One is, can you talk about the companies and what you think will happen that will have a direct benefit to it? Like I use John Deere as an example. They're a good example of someone that's like, yep, we love this. This tech hub in Montana is perfect for us for what we're trying to do. They'll be at the table saying, here's the challenges that we want help in overcoming.
Yep.
Can you give some examples of some other kind of companies or industries that would have a direct interest in what's happening?
Yeah, and so we've been talking about photonics. So the cluster of photonics is around Bozeman, but equally so, there's a whole cluster of industries and firms that have been evolving in Missoula around natural resource recovery, wildfire, treating wildfires. So that's a whole nother area of different types of companies, everything from the folks that make the supplies for those wildfire fighters, the folks that are flying drone technology over those wildfires to help the federal government, the state government, locals fight those fires. There's another whole hub is around national defense. And so there's all kinds of military companies and companies that support the U.S. military that will have a direct involvement in this hub in bringing solutions and being part of the development side of, as the hub grows, where do they fit in? How can they expand? What markets can we open up? What operations can we grow? And then there's all the support industry, right? So as you grow out a technology company, say, you're growing out 10 new sensing manufacturing companies, well, they all demand accounting services, they all demand legal services, they all demand sales services. So it's just, like I said, Silicon Valley is not a bad analogy in terms of where it started and how it grew, evolved upon itself once folks recognized, hey, all this density of talent and technology is all located here.
And so there's going to be companies in the natural resource arena, national defense arena, agriculture arena that are all going to be looking at Montana now and saying, hey, we've got a high interest in photonics and sensors, right? Where
Right,
can,
absolutely.
right, where
Yep.
can we plug in here? Because that's kind of where we see our industry, our specific business evolving to.
And again, yeah, and again, what they're interested in is the technology, right? And so one of a key piece of this hub, which will have to be working out, is how we share that technology amongst the partners that do come to the table. So when a John Deere comes to the table, but maybe other ag, equipment producers are at the table, how can we provide this technology in a way that benefits the greater good, and again keeping that eye on national economic security, but also protects the intellectual property rights, the development of these companies. uh, I have no ability to figure that out, so I'm really glad we've got really smart folks and people that have many years of experience coming to the table to help us in that area.
And then this will be the last question I'll ask, and we'll see if there are other questions
Sure.
that may come from this. And because there is this question about, you've got local economic development authorities, CRDCs,
Yep.
Local chambers. What's a role that you see for them as this thing unfolds, and how's the best way for them to engage if they've got like a specific interest in this?
Right. And so there's so so many different ways, and hopefully just listening to me, I've named off quite a few that folks go, "Oh, I get it. I can help market this, educate existing businesses about what we're doing, and so they can think about how they might grow and strategize as the hub develops." Or, "Oh, I am understanding that now we have more need for manufacturing workers. We're going to have more need for technicians in the R&D side. Let's see what I can do to help evolve that workforce." Or, "Oh, I know these really great companies that I've been working with that maybe aren't here in Montana, but are in these arenas that have looked at Montana, thought about Montana. This is a great time for me to go back and pitch where we are, what we're doing, so that they can be aware of it and then maybe reconsider their plans." And again, looking at where they can fit in terms of bringing in additional capital dollars that benefit the whole community, not just the hub, the growth of the hub in a way that keeps our Montana lifestyle the way we want it to be. These are all areas where I can't, stress enough how important our economic development partners, being both the CRDCs, the Chamber, META, all of our businesses, have to uh, feel like they can be part of this, and that we make sure that we're as inclusive as we can be.
So we should have done this at the beginning, but can you describe and tell us what your role is, right? You're the resident expert here. Can you
Oh
explain
my gosh.
kind of what your role is in this business, government, university sector here? And then we'll open it up, see if anybody has questions.
Yeah, well, basically, Todd, I'm a girl that can't keep a job. So I have 31, 32 years in state government, but I also have probably 20 years of that overlapped in the private sector. And in that 30 years of government, I've worked at higher ed. I was in the office of the commissioner. I've also am at the Department of Commerce. I've been at the Department of Labor. So I've kind of been at those different places that, when we're talking business development, workforce, university system, R&D, and private sector, ran a market research company for dozens and dozens of years. I was a good source, in the words of Scott Osterman. You're the person I think that can help be the hub of the hub. And so my role has been to bring state government to this conversation, to include all of our economic development partners. You mentioned, the CRDCs, funded partly out of Commerce, the META partners, the STED, State Tribal Economic Development. Tribal is a huge part of this. When we think about, for example, field testing, the need to take these technologies and have field testing, the need to have small colleges that can be in charge of that testing and all that. I think that's a perfect opportunity for our tribal colleges. Reservation tribal areas are areas that we also have undertapped employment possibilities, workforce possibilities. It's a perfect place for them to be engaged. So um, I I just, like I said, all I've been doing is really the hub of the hub to help keep the conversation going, um, be a conduit between industry, government, and the university system, simply because I've been involved in all three areas.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Questions?
Hey, Mary, as a statistician, what do you think our chances are for phase 2?
91.8%.
Good enough. We'll take them.
No, I really
Todd,
do.
I'm a
And
sucker.
I know, I'm going to go on the record. I'm going to say this because I went on the record in phase 1 and said we're absolutely going to get a designation. And everybody's like, "Oh, you can't say that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can." Um, we Again, we're not in competition with 31 hubs. We are in competition with 6 or 7. Most of those other ones are located in the Northeast, upper Northeast, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Those also received other designations. If you start looking at who got designated as a hub out here, there's not much over the Rocky Mountain region. There's one in Colorado in the Quantum area. There's one in Washington, but they just didn't sprinkle them heavily out here. So I think that also plays to our advantage, but particularly because we are the photonics hub, we're not up against a bunch of bioscience hubs. There's, I think, 6 or 7 different bioscience hubs that were designated. We're the photonics hub that got a designation. So 91.8% is my prediction.
We'll take it.